am terribly uncoordinated. I got a lot of really great gifts to my parents, but walking in a straight line wasn't one of them. And even as an adult, I've gotten scabs on my knees when I've tripped over curves, and scabs on my elbows when I tried to dance a jig in the street on St. Patrick's Day, and scabs all the way down my forehead and my nose when I swam into the side of a swimming pool. I have walked into screen doors and glass doors and slipped on dog food on the floor. Well, there was one time when I walked into a parking meter in Annapolis and got this terrible bruise on my hip when I was talking to my grandmother. And she gave me some advice that I'm going to share with you today. She said, "Doll, look where you're going." Just in case you didn't get that. Now, I'm not going to call you doll for this entire talk, but I'm going to tell you why it's a good idea to look where you're going and what happened to me when I started looking where I was going. I mean, really looking. Not just for parking meters, but for people. And how I could connect, and how I could help, and how I could lead, and how I could serve. Because when I started looking, like really looking, my path opened up. Now, when I was growing up, my parents tried to teach me how to lead and connect, and they were like real do-gooders. They were Peace Corps volunteers and teachers, and my mom is still a Baltimore City school teacher, and she's really committed to, she said, taking care of her corner of the world. But you know, sometimes as your parents teach you, they don't really stick until you become an adult. And my dad is really great about making connections with people. And I was thinking about one time when I was in high school, and your parents can still kind of embarrass you. And we were in a convenience store that I went to all the time, and it was owned by a guy that like never smiled. Just constant scowl on his face, and he always worked the register. So my dad was in there with me one time, and he started talking to this guy. He said, "Oh, you know, where are you from?" And he was from Pakistan, and he had moved here like 20 years ago. He had been an engineer in Pakistan, and now he owned this convenience store. And my dad said, "Oh, Pakistan. Oh, yeah, you know, I was there when I was in college." And he started singing the Pakistani national anthem in Urdu in the middle of the convenience store. And so the guy working, I was like wanting to melt into the floor, but I looked over, and this guy that never smiled was grinning. And then he started singing with my dad in the store. But it made me think about what it means when you see people, and what it means to see them, and what you can do when you connect. But I got busy becoming an adult. I went to college and got married and got a job and took a lot of really great trips and went to a lot of great happy hours and had a great time. And, you know, I served here and there. I would do a volunteer day and help friends in a pinch. I gave blood. But I wasn't really fulfilled. Happy, but not fulfilled. And it wasn't until I started really looking at where I was going that I started feeling fulfilled. And it happened when I joined a program called the Greater Baltimore Committee Leadership Program. And they take 50 leaders from all over Baltimore, and the goal is to teach the leaders about this region, about this city, how things work, what goes on here. And I thought, I'm a leader, executive director of Baltimore College Town, and I really like doing things, and I thought I might be able to meet a lot of great people and, you know, see some things, and I thought this would be a good thing to put on my resume. But I didn't think it would change my life. One of the things that I got to do with the GBC Leadership Program was to take a tour of the prison in downtown Baltimore. So that's the building where, if you're coming down 83, Power Plant Live is on your right. I know y'all know where that is. The prison is on your left. It's a building with those tiny windows and these big towers that look like they were built in the 1800s, because they were. So the night before the prison tour, I was like freaking out, because I was like, there's murderers there, and rapists, and people who are just bad, and I don't want to have anything to do with that, and it just made me really uncomfortable. And my husband was like, maybe you shouldn't go. Maybe, just skip this one. I was like, no, the point of the program is to open yourself up so you can see things. So, I'm going. So I went into the prison and they, pat you down. There's this whole big scan thing that you have to get in. But when we got into the main part of the prison, the warden greets us, and it's got this huge ring of skeleton keys, like those old style keys. And that's what he uses to open the main gate. It's like, am I in Shawshank Redemption? It was like exactly like the movie. And we're walking through, and there's just like the little cells, and the whole place smelled like marijuana, which nobody really was mentioning. And it didn't really impact me that much. I was like, okay, the prison. But then the warden said, I'm going to take you to the new part. The new wasn't really that new, but it was newer than the 1800s part. And when we walked in, it was a room like the size of this room, lined with bunk beds, like bunk bed, bunk bed, bunk bed, bunk bed. Like the whole room was like bunk beds with one wall like showers. And it was like, nobody gets any privacy. That's where people were. And it was hundreds of guys just hanging out, like doing time, like doing nothing. And I was asking the warden, I was like, well, do you do, like job training or drug treatment or counseling or, what goes on here? And he was like, yeah, there is a psychologist here, one, for thousands of people that probably have some things to talk about. And there is internet access for 2 hours most days for thousands of people to, do some job training and job searching. And that was about it. And when I started looking around, I didn't feel scared of these men because they were just people. They were my fellow humans. They were a father and a son. And I started thinking, what am I doing? And what can we do to give people more choices than just this incredible waste? And after the prison tour, I had an opportunity to do a ride-along with a Baltimore City police officer in the Eastern District, a full shift, 3 p.m. to 11 p.m. And I got to the police station, and they were supposed to give me a bulletproof vest, and I couldn't find one. I had to sign a form about that, but again, keeping myself open to new experiences. So I got into the police car, and I was sitting in the passenger seat, and the police officer gets in next to me, and I was like, hey, Officer Davis, I'm going to be with you for your whole shift today. What do we do? And he's like, I'll tell you what we do. Put the seatbelt on, put the radio on. He's like, we sit back and we just wait for shit to happen. And it did. For 8 hours straight. On a Tuesday night in East Baltimore, he had a 6 by 6 block area that he covered. It was nonstop. It was like drug deals, and he was chasing people, and he was in and out of the car. I mean, it was like nonstop. And one of the things that we did was we went into an apartment that he was looking for something for, and it was like typical Baltimore row house that had been divided up into like 3 or 4 apartments, and we went in the stairs like up to the 3rd floor, and we walked in, and I couldn't believe that people lived here, because all the walls had like crumbled, and there were these 4x4s holding up the ceiling with sheets strung between them to kind of like divide up the rooms, and there was rat poop everywhere, and kids' toys all mixed in. And I was like, I live like 6 or 7 miles from here. And I am so fortunate to have a really beautiful home. Like, why are people in my city living like this? And after we got back in the car, we drove around for a little bit longer, and he got a call on the radio that there had been a shooting. Not in his 6-block radius, but it was like in the next one over, and so they go, it's backup. And so we drove over to this apartment complex where it had happened, and we pulled up outside, and he's like, do you want to go? I was like, I don't know. What do you think? He's like, if you're here to see what happens in Baltimore, he's like, you should go. You should go. You should get out of the car. Okay. So we walk in, and the apartment complex was like 3 like buildings of apartments with like a courtyard in the middle. And we go into the courtyard, and on the sidewalk path was this man who had been shot, and the paramedics were there, and they were doing the chest compressions, and they had the oxygen mask. And looking at that wasn't actually the most jarring part of that experience. It was when I turned around and saw these little children, maybe 30 children, tiny. And I thought, why does this have to be part of their reality? This unbelievably violent thing that they all just watched and were taking in. And I was finally looking and seeing. And when I finally started looking at where I was going, I wasn't really sure where I was going. But I needed to do something different. And one of the great things about the GDC Leadership Program is I also met a lot of people who were doing good things. My now friend, Debbie Hickman, has this huge RV that she drives around doing HIV testing because she saw this need. Baltimore has the second highest rate of AIDS in the country after Miami. And you have to get tested to know your status so that you can take steps to be treated. She's doing it. And another woman who started Tootie's Place to take boys that nobody else would take care of, to love them and educate them and house them, because she saw this problem and she's doing something. And Jessica Turrell, who you'll hear from today, who saw a problem in the prisons with children who are not being educated and is doing something. So I went back to her life and I started volunteering a little bit, and it was like, once a month at the little feast, and we could do a couple things in my church. It wasn't really a commitment. So I started thinking about Baltimore College Town. So I'm director of the Baltimore College Town Network, and I've been able to work with 14 colleges here to plan programs and do college nights and get students involved in things in the city and talk about what a great city it is, because there are a lot of really great things about Baltimore. But the thing is, there are 120,000 students here. And a lot of you are passionate and interesting and interested in doing something. And I was like, there are so many people in Baltimore and the world that need your passion, your time, your leadership. And I went back to this proposal that I'd been a little part of for something called Baltimore Leadership. And it had been put together a couple of years ago with the great leadership of Deb Moriarty and others to have a program that took students from many colleges and trained them to be leaders in the community. Train them to find a vision for themselves that they could follow. But nothing really happened with it because nobody was sure how to fund it or how to get it off the ground or who was going to get it going. And so it had been sitting. And when I started looking, that's what was in my path. Because the thing is, you're the only one that sees things the way that you do. And your experiences and your natural gifts combine in a way that gives you a vision that no one else has. So if you see something, if you see a problem, it could be that you're the only one that sees it. And you can't wait for somebody else to do something about it because nobody else sees it like you do. So I got Baltimore College Town Leadership off the ground with a lot of support from people at our colleges, and I had a friend from my leadership class who worked for a bank, and I said, could you fund some of this? Yes. Talked to 10 colleges, can you send students to this? Are you interested in participating? Yes. And with great leadership, a great staff person, we now have 100 students who graduated from College Town Leadership who are following their own visions and doing amazing work in the community that I never would have thought about. Somebody is working to end human trafficking, another to make sure nobody dies in a house fire, another using art to heal communities, another mentoring at-risk students in robotics. And they inspire me all the time. because it's not easy to do something new. And I had a lot of reasons to not get involved in this program because I already had a really busy job and I had just had a little baby, and my husband works full-time and he was working on his PhD and everything was kind of crunched. But when I started looking, really looking at where I was going, this thing was in my path and I just had to do it. And about a month ago, something happened that kind of crystallized this message that I wanted to give to you tonight. I was driving down York Road, right when it turns into Greenmount Avenue, right above Cold Spring Lane. And I was driving and there was something in the road, like far ahead, and I could see all these cars driving around it. I was like, a trash can or something, and I got a little closer, and it was like moving, and maybe it's a dog, and all the cars driving around, and I get close enough to see, and it was a man in the road. And I get close enough and I pull over, and as I was getting out of the car, another woman pulled over also, and we helped him over to the curb, and it was right by a Loyola University building, and they called an ambulance. And so we were sitting with this man, waiting for an ambulance, and I was like, what happened? I didn't know, on the road. And he's like, I tripped. I'm really glad you were looking where you were going.